She said yes under stained glass windows, surrounded by everyone she loved. The dress was perfect, the vows were beautiful, and the man standing across from her looked like everything she'd ever dreamed of. But what Sarah didn't know as she slipped that ring onto his finger was that the man she was marrying wasn't who he claimed to be at all. His name wasn't even real, and by the time she discovered the truth, it would already be too late to undo what she'd done. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher from a small town in Ohio, and a wedding night that would shatter everything she believed about love and trust. It's a story pulled from real events, from court documents and investigative reports that would eventually make headlines across the country. Who was the man she married, really? Why did his past seem to vanish into thin air? And what was he hiding the night she discovered documents that would change everything? Did he even give her his real name? Could a lifetime of carefully constructed lies unravel in a single devastating night? Sarah grew up in Willow Creek, Ohio, population 3,200. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where Friday night football games were the biggest event of the week. Her parents ran a hardware store on Main Street. Her older brother became a firefighter. Her younger sister married her high school sweetheart. Sarah wanted that too. She wanted stability, a family, someone to build a life with. She just wanted real love, the kind her grandparents had, the kind that lasted 50 years. She met him on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 years before the wedding. She was at a coffee shop in Columbus, meeting a college friend she hadn't seen in months. He was sitting 2 tables over with a laptop and a cup of black coffee, and when their eyes met, he smiled. Not a cocky smile, just a warm, genuine smile that made her feel seen. When her friend got up to use the restroom, he walked over. His name was David Carter, he said. He was from Austin, Texas, recently relocated to Ohio for work. He was an independent contractor in tech consulting, helping small businesses set up their systems. He spoke softly, asked questions, listened when she answered. By the time her friend came back, he'd already asked for her number. Their first date was dinner at an Italian restaurant downtown. He showed up 15 minutes early, brought her wildflowers, not roses, just a simple bouquet he said reminded him of something his mother used to pick. He told her about growing up in Texas, about his parents who passed away in a car accident when he was 21, about how he'd been on his own ever since. He said Ohio felt different though, quieter, like a place he could actually settle down. Sarah felt something shift in her chest when he said that. David seemed to already know what he wanted. Over the next few months, they fell into a rhythm that felt easy and natural. He'd drive down to Willow Creek on weekends, help her father fix things around the house, play cards with her mother, take her nephew to the park. Everyone loved him. Her father said he had a good handshake, looked you in the eye when he spoke. Her mother said he was polite, always offered to help with dishes. Her friends said he was a keeper. Sarah felt like she'd won some kind of lottery. He was steady, kind, present. He never raised his voice, never made her feel small, never gave her a reason to doubt him. A year into their relationship, he proposed on a hiking trail near Hocking Hills. The sun was setting through the trees, casting everything in gold and amber light. He got down on one knee, pulled out a simple diamond ring, and asked her to marry him. She said yes before he even finished the question. That night, they stayed up until 3 a.m. talking about everything, the wedding, the house they'd buy, the kids they'd have someday. Sarah remembers thinking, this is it. This is the person I'm supposed to be with. The wedding was planned for the following October, a small ceremony at the church where Sarah grew up. David didn't have much family to invite, he said. His parents were gone and he'd lost touch with most of his extended relatives, but that was okay. In the months leading up to the wedding, everything seemed perfect. They found a little house on the edge of town. Sarah picked out paint colors. David installed new shelves in the garage. But there were moments, small moments, Sarah didn't think much about at the time, that later would come back to haunt her. Like the time she asked to see pictures of his parents, and he said most of them were lost in a storage unit fire years ago. Or the time her brother tried to look him up on social media and couldn't find much of anything. David said he wasn't big on social media, preferred to live in the real world. Or the time she asked about his college days, and his answers were vague, general, like he was describing a movie he'd seen rather than something he'd lived. The wedding day arrived on a Saturday in October, crisp and clear. The ceremony was everything she'd imagined. The church smelled like roses and old wood. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass. Her father walked her down the aisle, and David was waiting at the altar in a charcoal gray suit, his eyes wet with tears. They exchanged vows, voices steady and sure. When the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," David cupped her face gently and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Everyone clapped. It was perfect. They left the reception around 10, drove to a bed and breakfast about 30 miles away. It was an old Victorian house, all dark wood and antique furniture. They opened a bottle of champagne, clinked glasses, kissed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Sarah went to change in the bathroom. When she came out, David was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone with an expression she'd never seen before. Not angry, not sad, just blank, hollow. She asked if everything was okay. He looked up at her, and for just a second, she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But then he smiled and said everything was fine, just a work email. They made love for the first time as husband and wife, and Sarah tried to push away the uneasy feeling that had crept into her chest. And that's when everything she thought she knew began to crumble. If this story has your heart racing, comment "I'm still watching." Let's see who's truly following till the end. But she couldn't sleep. Hours passed, and David was out cold beside her, but Sarah lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying that look in his eyes. Around 3 in the morning, she got up to use the bathroom. On her way back, she noticed his phone on the nightstand, screen still glowing faintly. The screen showed a text message preview from a number with no name attached. The message said, "You need to call me. It's important. They're asking questions." Sarah's heart started pounding. Who was asking questions? Questions about what? She picked up the phone, hands shaking. It wasn't locked. She opened the messages. There were dozens of texts from that same number going back months. Most of them were vague, cryptic, but one message sent 3 weeks before the wedding made her blood run cold. It said, "If she finds out who you really are, this whole thing falls apart. You know that, right?" Sarah felt like the room was tilting. She opened her email app, barely breathing. The inbox was mostly work-related stuff, normal, boring things, but there was a folder labeled Personal, and when she opened it, her entire world shattered. There were documents, scanned images of legal papers, a birth certificate with a different name, not David Carter. The name on the certificate was Julian Reeves, born in New Mexico, not Texas. There was a driver's license, expired, with his face but that other name. There were emails discussing identity documentation, something about sealed records, something about making sure certain information stayed buried. She wanted to wake him up, to scream at him, to demand answers, but something stopped her. Fear, maybe, or the realization that if she confronted him now, alone in a remote inn with no one around, she had no idea what he might do. So instead, she quietly took pictures of everything with her own phone, her hands barely holding it steady. Then she put his phone back exactly where it was, crawled back into bed, and lay there in the dark, her mind racing. The next morning, David woke up cheerful, affectionate, acting like nothing was wrong. Sarah played along, smiled, laughed at his jokes, all while feeling like she was going to be sick. They spent the day exploring the town. To anyone watching, they looked like a perfect newlywed couple, but inside, Sarah was screaming. They drove home Sunday evening. Sarah made an excuse about needing to stop by her parents' house, said she'd meet him at their new place later. Instead, she drove straight to her brother's house. Jake took one look at her face and knew something was catastrophically wrong. She showed him the pictures she'd taken. Jake's face went white. He pulled out his laptop and started searching, typing Julian Reeves into every database he could access. What they found made Sarah's stomach drop even further. Julian Reeves had a criminal record: fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. He'd been arrested twice in his 20s, served time for one of the charges. The most recent arrest was 6 years ago in Arizona, but after that, the trail went cold. It was like he'd disappeared, or more accurately, like he'd become someone else. He'd become David Carter, a man with a clean slate, a man with no past. They called a lawyer. The lawyer confirmed what Jake had suspected. If David had married Sarah using a false identity, a marriage might not even be legally valid. The lawyer said they needed to document everything and contact law enforcement immediately. Sarah felt like she was in a nightmare. Less than 48 hours ago, she'd been the happiest woman alive. Now she was being told her husband was a criminal. The police took her statement that night. They told her to go home, to act normal, to not let on that she knew anything. It was the hardest thing she's ever done. She drove to the house, walked through the door, and found him cooking dinner in the kitchen. He smiled when he saw her, kissed her forehead, asked about her day. Sarah forced herself to smile back, to pretend everything was fine while her entire world was crumbling. Over the next week, the police worked quickly. They confirmed Julian Reeves' identity, matched fingerprints, verified the fraud conviction. They discovered he'd been using the David Carter identity for almost 7 years. The tech consulting business was semi-legitimate, but most of his income came from low-level scams, credit card fraud, identity schemes. He'd chosen Sarah because she was exactly what he needed. Someone stable, someone with good credit, someone whose name he could use to secure loans and open accounts. They arrested him on a Thursday morning. Sarah was at school when 2 detectives showed up. She rode in the back of an unmarked car to the house and watched as officers led her husband out in handcuffs. He saw her standing there on the sidewalk, and the look on his face was something she'll never forget. Not anger, not fear, just resignation, like he'd always known this was coming. He didn't fight the charges. Julian Reeves pleaded guilty to fraud, identity theft, and several other charges. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The marriage was annulled, declared legally invalid because he'd entered into it under false pretenses. Sarah got a letter from him a few weeks later. He said he never meant to hurt her, that becoming David Carter had felt like a chance to start over. He said meeting her had made him want to actually be that person, but he didn't know how. He said the night of the wedding he'd almost told her everything, but he was too much of a coward. Sarah read the letter 3 times, then burned it in her mother's fireplace. In that moment, she realized the man she loved had never existed at all. The aftermath was brutal. The annulment meant the marriage never legally existed, but emotionally it had been completely real to her. She'd loved him. She'd built a future around him. The shame was overwhelming, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she felt like she should have known, should have seen the signs. People in town tried to be kind, but she could see the pity in their eyes. Sarah sold the house, moved back in with her parents for a few months. She went to therapy, talked through the betrayal, the violation of trust. Her therapist said what happened wasn't just about the lies, it was about having her reality completely rewritten. Everything she thought was true turned out to be fiction. It's a kind of trauma that doesn't leave visible scars, but it cuts just as deep. Slowly, over months and then years, Sarah started to rebuild. She stayed in Willow Creek, kept teaching, reconnected with friends. She dated a little, trying to remember what it felt like to trust someone. It was hard. Every time a man asked her out, she found herself looking for the cracks, the inconsistencies. 3 years after the annulment, Sarah met someone new. His name was Ryan, a history teacher at the high school in the next town over. He was patient with her, understood when she said she needed to take things slow. He gave her access to everything, let her talk to his family, showed her his college yearbooks and childhood photos. It shouldn't have been necessary, but for Sarah, it was the only way she could move forward. They've been together for 2 years now. They're not married. Sarah's not sure she ever wants to get married again, but they're happy. Ryan knows the whole story, knows why Sarah sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. He doesn't try to fix it, just holds her until she can breathe normally again. That's love, Sarah thinks now. Not the fairy tale, not the perfect wedding, just someone who stays when things get hard. The worst part, she tells people who ask, wasn't the lies themselves. It was the way he made her doubt her own instincts. All those little moments where something felt off, she ignored them because she wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. Now she knows better. Now she knows that real love isn't about perfection. It's about truth. Sarah's story isn't unique. Every year, thousands of people discover that the person they married isn't who they claimed to be.
Identity fraud in relationships is more common than most people realize. If you were in Sarah's position, if you discovered on your wedding night that everything you thought you knew about your partner was a lie, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately, or would you gather evidence first? These aren't easy questions, and there are no right answers. What Sarah wants people to understand is that trust isn't naive, and being deceived doesn't make you weak. She was smart, educated, surrounded by people who loved her, and she still fell for it. The best we can do is stay aware, ask questions, trust our instincts, and remember that real love doesn't require us to ignore our doubts. Real love welcomes questions, invites scrutiny, stands up to examination. The man she married called himself David Carter, but his real name was Julian Reeves, and he stole 2 years of her life. But he didn't steal her future. That still belongs to her, and she's still writing it, one careful day at a time. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about trust and truth and the risks we take when we open our hearts to someone, leave a comment. Tell us how you'd handle being in Sarah's shoes. Tell us what you think love should look like when it's real and honest. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the stories we share here. Stories about real people facing impossible situations. And if you thought this was unbelievable, wait until you see what we uncover next.